Hello, welcome to You and Your Reps, where we bring you up to speed on activities of Nigeria's House of Representatives. This week, however, with just over a year to go, we will be assessing the achievements of the Ninth House, especially with regards to executive-legislature relations. Of course, we will also be bringing you our regular segments. I am Victor Azu. Thank you for joining us. To examine the achievements of the Ninth Assembly will be Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters, House of Representatives, Umar El-Yakub. To get the ball rolling and set the stage for the conversation, I asked him to give us an insight into his mandate.
Liaison work between the executive arm and the legislature, in particular the House of Representatives, as far as I'm concerned. And what we do is to ensure there is synergy, there is robust understanding to the extent of having a very cordial and harmonious relationship, to ensure that policies and programs of government have the consideration, and in fact I would add expeditious consideration, of the House of Representatives. This of course includes communications from Mr. President on certain programs and policies of government, to the extent of communicating bills for the consideration and passage into law by the House of Representatives, and of course, as you know, since we operate a bicameral legislature, by the National Assembly. And also very key appointments which the legislature has the mandate of screening the President's nominees, mostly in the Senate, but some in the House of Representatives, and also approving the number, in the case of the House of Representatives, of the presidential advisors for the appointment by Mr. President. In that regard, we also, part of my mandate is to ensure that those executive bills that have been transmitted to the National Assembly for consideration receives not only the expeditious passage, but certainly the understanding. And for that to happen, in some cases, we have to lobby them within the legal space, to ensure that they understand where the executive is coming from, to the extent of ensuring that those bills become acts of the National Assembly after the assent of Mr. President. Facilitation of meetings between the House of Representatives leadership, or the caucuses, and the executive, and vice versa, be it at the instance of Mr. President or the leadership of the House of Representatives, is part of my mandate. Of course, ensuring that my office is properly has the right capacity. So we keep building capacity within the opportunities that we have to provide, act as a liaison, as a clearinghouse between the executive and the legislature. That's also part of our mandate, i.e. between the committees, the standing committees of the House of Representatives and the various MDAs, ensuring that meetings and public hearings for consideration of bills and early engagement with stakeholders, i.e. the relevant MDAs, in terms of understanding certain programs or policies of government, as well as executive bills that are being transmitted to the National Assembly. And also um, vice versa, to the extent that also bills, private member bills, are also given the same consideration by the executive arm of government and understanding. And we have had a very cordial um, relationship anchored on the certainly on the respect for the separation of powers between the National Assembly, i.e., the legislature, and the executive. And also, we have been able to build that understanding, you know, to the extent that we have, we have most of our bills passed expeditiously by the National Assembly. And people keep wondering how that happens. And that happens because of what I just mentioned earlier, i.e., constant engagement with effective communication between the leadership, the members of the House of Representatives, and of course the executive arm of government. The mandate of my office, or indeed my mandate, is a bit wide, and in ensuring this harmonious relationship with the House of Representatives, one has to also cultivate a personal relationship with the members of the House of Representatives, to the extent that they see you as one of theirs, not necessarily as an outsider. And sometimes, I get the comments from some of colleagues, because I call them my colleagues, because I was a member of the House of Representatives. I remember the leader used to say that I'm the 361st member, or 361st member of the House of Representatives, because I try to see things from their perspective as well. And having been a member, even though a long time ago, and to also say there is some kind of difference in the role, or a lot of difference in my role, especially because when I was a member, I was in the opposition, and now I'm serving the government in power. So there is a bit of difference, and also the government in power, which also has the majority in the House of Representatives and of course the National Assembly. So there is a bit of a difference, but at all times, my role is to ensure that there is that understanding, there is that appreciation, and certainly based on the relationship, which has been a relationship that is more of a partnership between the executive and legislative arm of government, because in any event, we are one government, striving to serve one people. And we are all elected, both the executive and the legislature, to do the bidding of the Nigerian people. So whatever it takes to ensure that, even though we appreciate our differences and responsibilities of each other, we have to converge at certain points. And that is the beauty of democracy, and that is also as a result of the leadership that Mr. President has been providing in this country. And of course, from the onset, the leadership has provided, in collaboration with the leadership of the National Assembly, in ensuring that we have a very good, cordial, and harmonious relationship, so that Nigerians will benefit from government. So we have, and I believe there has been a commitment from the onset by both the President and of course the leadership of the National Assembly in that regard. And we were able to achieve so much within this period of the National Assembly, 9th National Assembly.
Indeed, there is no gainsaying the fact that there was commitment from both the executive and the legislature, at the exception of the 9th Assembly, to work together for the benefit of Nigerians. But how well exactly has that paid off? I guess that's something to find out. But that will be after Chairman of the House Committee on Rules and Business, Abubakar Fulata, tells us something about oath of office. And that's on legislative terms and tools.
when you are assuming uh, a position as a member of House of Representatives, first of all, you have to swear allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Okay? Then you also take an oath of office as a member of House of Representatives, pledging, one, to abide by the Constitution, secondly, to maintain the secrecy of whatever, because in your capacity as an elected member, a lot of information, detailed security information, a lot of information, financial, everything, confidential information will come onto your table. As a member of House of Representatives, you are not supposed to disclose those informations to outsiders. So you first of all, you take an oath of office, oath of allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria and abide by all the constitutional provisions, and then take an oath of office, oath as a member of the House. Again, swear allegiance to to the Constitution, and also the secrecy, maintain the secrecy of whatever information that will come to you as a member. You have oversight functions on virtually many governmental agencies, ministries, a lot of things, budgetary information, a lot of information will come to your distance. So you are not supposed to disclose this thing to an outside party.
Quite a broad definition of oath of office there. Meanwhile, on the success stories of the executive Ninth Assembly Synergy, here's what the Senior Special Assistant to the President on National Assembly Matters has to tell us.
Well, the big win is not only for the Ninth National Assembly and indeed not for the executive, but Nigerians, because the very critical legislations that have been passed by the House of Representatives and, of course, the National Assembly as a whole, and where have been assented by Mr. President, which have been quite a lot in this Ninth National Assembly, because in the last 3 years, at least over 50 bills have been passed and assented to. More bills have been passed actually, but those assented to by Mr. President. And those bills are critical bills that touches directly the lives of Nigerians. So the win is the fact that they are very important, critical, and you can call them legacy legislations that have been done by this government. I will mention quite a few. The Petroleum Industry Act that we have, the Karma Act, the of recent the Electoral Act, and a great achievement by both the legislature and the executive is the returning of the budget circle the last 3 years from January to December, which has essentially made the implementation of the Appropriation Act, very positive, easy, and also largely implemented 100% in the last few years because of this commitment and collaboration between the legislature and the executive. And like I said, Nigerians are the beneficiaries of this relationship because, as I'm sure you are aware, the fact that the budget circle had been returned from January to December, which before now, budgets are not passed almost by half the year and are not assented to, and therefore implementation of the budget becomes impossible. You get very little percentage of that is implemented before the year runs out. And Therefore, projects are not properly implemented because there is no time to implement and commission. But the fact that the budget cycle has been returned to January, December fiscal year, you find that there has been a lot of implementation because planning has gotten into it in good time, and especially when you look at um, uh, the projects themselves, capital projects implementation, I mean, you find that there is enough time to construct roads and other things, considering the fact that some are affected by the seasons that we have within a particular year. That is a very significant achievement. That is a legacy that this National Assembly would have left by the time it leaves, and of course, the government of President Muhammad Buhari. Another one is the Petroleum Industry Act, which we all know what that means to the petroleum industry sector, which is very important in our national life because it's the biggest provider of revenue to the Federation account. And for that space to be opened and framework established that brings about increased investment in the industry, thereby creating more jobs and bringing economic development to the country, is a very significant achievement, I would say. And that bill has been in the works for 2 decades, and nothing happened until this administration. Of course, we also know of the most recent one, the Electoral Act, which I have seen the passion that Nigerians have demonstrated in ensuring that we have a framework that looks at our election process in this country to the extent of deepening the democratic space and creating the level field and bringing transparency and credibility into our election processes in this country. And that is a fundamental and significant piece of legislation, which you also know that had been in the works for almost 10 years, because the last electoral act that we had was 2010. There are so many important legislation that had been passed by the 9th House of Representatives and 9th Assembly, because like I said, they work together. I give credit to both the Senate and the House for those very crucial and critical legislations that touches on the lives of Nigerians in several aspects. Because you take any area, be it education, health, security, agriculture, there are very significant, and critical laws that were passed. I commend the leadership of the House of Representatives, the members, and the entire National Assembly members for rising up to the occasion, demonstrating maturity and patriotism in the way they carry the business. Even the opposition members of the National Assembly, stood up to be counted on critical legislations and have, supported their colleagues and, of course, the government in ensuring that Nigerians get the best out of their representation.
Interesting. And ordinary Nigerians also have their say on the synergy between the executive arm of government and the 9th Assembly. Take a look.
To me, they achieved better results than the last assembly because there's a cordial relationship.
They are living in peace and they are working in harmony. So I don't see any problem with that, but they should create more jobs and do things that will affect the life of ordinary Nigerians.
That separation of power, that checks and balances, we are not seeing it there. So until there is a change in the configuration of the National Assembly members, we might not see anything different.
So far, from the little I know about the 9th Assembly, there has been a very good synergy and cooperation with this present government.
They don't have any teeth to bite or to reject something that is not good, thereby negating the principle or the doctrine of separation of power.
things evolve, and as they evolve, uh, exigencies of particular moments dictates how one responds as human beings. We have not done it all. As you know, in Nigeria, there had been a lot of laws, existing laws from some back, back in the colonial eras that some were still running, and it's only now that people are looking at those laws with a view to making important amendments. This has been achieved, like I said, largely because of the collaboration between the executive and the legislature. And you find that there are very important bills that have been private member bills that have been passed by both chambers of the National Assembly that were ascended by Mr. President, as well as, of course, the executive bills. And considering the fact that we're still a young democracy, there are a lot of things, a lot of areas that needs legal framework, and some that have existing framework that had to be amended as we move along, as we go forward, because of certain things that have happened. One of which is, our eyes were open to the health sector and how the health sector was ill-equipped to deal with the pandemic when we had, when coronavirus ravaged the entire world, as it were. And so quickly things had to be done. Legislation had to be done in terms of appropriation to ensure that we have the kind of healthcare facility required to not only detect but also to treat this kind of patients, which before we didn't have. And also that open our eyes also to other legislation, even in the healthcare industry, that needed to be considered. So you find that circumstances of the moment dictates what happens. And of course, people will still have bills for establishing one thing or the other, or amending one law or the other. And it could be a private member bill or an executive bill. One of the most important bills that we have introduced now is the startup bill, which you also know had been read the second time in the House of Representatives, and we expect an expeditious assent to that. And there are also other laws that target corruption, and like the poker bill, which is under consideration, and so many others that we hope to see passed by the National Assembly in order to also ensure that those areas get the necessary framework so that we can curtail drifts in certain areas, arrest other situations that need to be arrested by virtue of making sure that laws are there to take care of those aspects.
Indeed, so much to anticipate in the next 14 months or thereabout. But a lot has already been achieved, which many, including the Senior Special Assistant to the President, attribute to the renewed synergy between the executive and legislature. That's been You and Your Reps, a special episode of the program. Thanks for watching. I am Victor, as we join us again.